What's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, you are back. Have you recovered from your trip to the Bayou?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, I've joked about this. We've seen the whole kind of cornucopia of results under Brian Kelly, and I've often joked about, the best outcome is a close win. The second best outcome is a blowout win. I mean, to be fair, blowout wins, you kind of say like, oh, we're already done. We can play the rest of our night. But I would take a blowout loss over a close loss almost every time.
There we go.
And this is not copium. I experienced an incredibly close loss with Brian Kelly at an FSU game to start like 3 years ago. Then the one 2 years ago was a blowout, and that was such a better day for me. So yeah, overall trip was solid. It was just always love Baton Rouge. Krista and her husband John were awesome. Got stopped by their tailgate again. Do you want me to roast LSU now, or should I wait till we do the preview of Florida?
How instead of roasting, this is a positive space here. I'd like to think.
A little compliment sandwich.
Do we have a little compliment sandwich for Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator that I think you have been more critical of than I have in the past, but do you have anything for Alabama fans that would satisfy their hunger after a performance like that?
Louisiana is not Tennessee, so that's good. They're 1-0 against Louisiana.
How responsible is fake Mike the Tiger for the outcome? Because 6 points at least, but if it had come down to it and if like a last second play or something like that and LSU loses, then I think you can blame fake Mike the Tiger. That lopsided, I don't know. I think he's only part of the blame. There's too much other blame to go around.
Yeah, I you know what's so funny, man? You know me. I'm a big cat guy, as are you. One of my cats passed away, but I have Walter over here with me. And it's funny because I was bringing my girlfriend to her first LSU game, and she is also being a big cat person. And Jeff Landry, what a weirdo, man. I mean, like, nobody wanted that. That was the funniest part of it, is everybody I talked to throughout the day thought having a live tiger was stupid. And like, we visited the real Mike the Tiger. And I mean, like I said, say whatever you want politically, but just Jeff Landry's a goofus. I mean, the fact that he came out there and afterward tried to do like the sick burn Twitter thing where it's like, well, my tiger was the only tiger that showed up. It's like, your tiger was terrified the entire time. It was just really rough to watch as an LSU fan. And yeah, LSU didn't exactly cause it. They didn't stop it for sure. But that's the rough part of it, is that LSU catches all the slight for basically not getting in a fight with their governor over the course of Bama week. So great politicking as always, Louisiana.
Yeah. Just bad all around. There have been better days in the state of Louisiana, I think, than what played out on Saturday. We will have more LSU thoughts, so we will get into the specifics of the things that plagued them, obviously, in the Alabama game, things that played them down the stretch in the A&M game. We will talk about that with our breakdown of the Florida matchup. We have a breakdown of all 4 SEC games that we're going to talk about today. Only 4. It's not cupcake week because there's meaningful football to be played. It's pseudo cupcake week of sorts with the lighter slate. And then Bear Fallica, yes, Tennessee fans, we will talk about a certain quarterback of yours that Bear addressed and may or may not have talked about his concussion previously this week. So we will dig into that, some Heisman stuff, some Miami stuff. Bear is always so great. So it was fun to be able to catch up with him. We will get to that in a bit. And lad of the week. Will, football. We have playoff implications in every single game. I'm just going to say that every week. Every single week. Technically, all 4 of these SEC games have a team who at least believes it has a playoff path. Shout out to you, Mizzou. So playoff implications. I'm just going to say it. And if you disagree with that, that's just your opinion and mine probably as well. But let's start with Texas and Arkansas. Number 3, Texas, a 13.5-point favorite against the Hogs. The over-under I have is 1.5 flashbacks to when they played in 2021, 3 years ago already.
That's more than talked about a lot.
Yeah, it has been. It's relevant in some ways. I think it was a really relevant game for what Arkansas was obviously building post Chad Morris to be able to win that game 40-21. Texas at the time is overrated. You kind of knew it early in the season, but they had just beaten Billy Napier's Louisiana Lafayette team in 2021 to start off the year. And that was seen as like, oh, nice little win for Sark to start off. But his first true road game, and it was a sign of things to come. I mean, Arkansas ran all over them. They ran for 340 yards that night against that Texas defense, who ended up being a bottom 20 run defense that held them back from making the postseason that first year with Sark. And with Arkansas, that of course became their identity. They embraced the hog like none other in 2021. We can only say that on college football podcasts. We can't say that anywhere else. But it's a much different matchup 3 years later. Of course, we know that. And Sark and Pittman are at different places with their respective programs. Arkansas is coming off of a bye after Ole Miss stomped them and took their lunch money in Fayetteville. And once again, Arkansas will welcome an elite schemer and perhaps another elite veteran quarterback, depending on how you think of Quinn Ewers. This is obviously a time that Texas has to attack downfield. This is where Arkansas has been vulnerable. And it's not full on 22 levels of that secondary. It's not that bad, but this defense has allowed 9 passing plays of 50 yards. Won a game of 50 yards where you're just getting cooked that badly. New Mexico State, only FBS team that's allowed more than 9 plays of 50 yards. The Austin American Statesman had this stat about Ewers that I think is something that you've talked about a lot. You know, the Ewers draft discussion, for my money, is different than who he is as a college player, but this is kind of tied to both. His average depth of target this year, Will, is 6.3 yards. That is the lowest of any regular FBS starter. He is 28 for 62 on passes that travel beyond 10 yards. It's telling. It really, and I've liked Quinn Ewers' deep ball in the past, and it just hasn't necessarily been there this year. I don't think you can just say, well, he doesn't have Xavier Worthy, he doesn't have A.D. Mitchell anymore. I think it's more than that. And I think you've kind of spoke about that, at least even early in the season when it seemed like we were talking about him as one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the sport. But it's pretty telling that in addition to that stat, the guy with the most 20-yard catches for Texas, tight end Gunnar Helm. Nice player. Probably not popular, to have a tight end leading that stat, unless it's Brock Bowers or something like that. But Isaiah Bond,
I don't even think
Ryan
Kyle
Wingo.
Pitts led his team with that stat because they had Tony.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I was going to say
Grimes
Pitts,
had
but
a lot.
Yeah, they had some burners on that team in 2020 Florida.
Now I'm going to have to look that up. That's an interesting question, but it doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
All right, it's just not the most popular thing. Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, they lead the team right now with 2 catches of 40 yards apiece. It's not a whole lot for your 1 and 2 wideouts. In SEC play, Texas has 4 pass plays of 40 yards, 2 of which were by running backs. That's not exactly a reliable deep ball in the way that you would have expected with someone of Quinn Ewers' pedigree. How much of that is personnel? How much of that is just Ewers kind of looking off on the downfield shots? And maybe some of it is injury. Maybe it's not injury at all. But it's just been who he is this year. I got to think.
Crazy about that, too. Like, as you say that, we've kind of honed in on these first quarter picks that Quinn Ewers has. The ones that I can vividly imagine with my mind are downfield shots. He had one like that against TCU last year. So it's almost like, here's a weird non-Arch Manning comp for you. Like Peyton Manning's last year when he was with the Broncos, he was like, no, I'm still Peyton Manning. I'm going to try to be
ducks.
Yeah, he was throwing these ducks. And it's like Quinn Ewers is like, guys, I do have an NFL arm. And he'll throw like this ridiculous pass that gets picked off. And he's like, actually, got to hit the tight end here. So like, I guess I'll give him credit for trying. But to your point, yeah, I'm not sure how much of that is, you had basically 3 great receivers last year. I don't want to do the good to great comparison, but some deep threats at receiver
Whittingham
last year.
too. It's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big thing that was made at media days was that they kept 3 receivers on the field at almost all times, and they're working in 3 new guys, And so point being, like, yeah, the trust in there. Yeah, he's been kind of injured, but I think it's the fact that he kind of maybe thinks he has like 100, like a top 1% arm, whereas he might have like a top 20 or 30% arm, and he trusts it early in games, and then it bites him, and he goes, well, wait a minute, I'm going to run Sark's system. And really quick note on that, like I said this to Peyton over the weekend, credit to Sark, man, because, with all the running back injuries, with all the weird stuff that's happened with Quinn Ewers getting hurt with the receivers, like all that does is make me more respectful of Sark.
Absolutely, man. I would take Sark over pretty much, I think, any offensive mind in the sport. If you want to get into head coaching stuff, that's a different conversation for my money. But just in terms of scheme, recognizing what a defense struggles with, what a defense is going to be able to defend well, I just think he's brilliant. I do. And that goes back to, well before his time at Texas. And, it just is, to me, it's about what are you able to do with this version of Quinn Ewers? What are you able to do in this matchup? And that's going to be kind of a theme today. Is there are going to be some very obvious things that teams should be able to take advantage of, but can they? Because you can think one thing and then see another, and you could think that Quinn Ewers can throw that deep ball, but if it's just not there in the ways that it was last year, and you can go back and watch stuff last year, go back and watch 2 years ago against Bama, some of the deep balls that he was throwing. It's just been a little bit different. So can you do that in this game? Can you expose this Arkansas secondary that has had those issues? And look, on the flip side, I don't really know what to expect from this Arkansas offense week to week. You know, is Taylor Green going to stay healthy for a full game? I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you that we're not going to see a ton of Malachi Singleton in this one. Does that matter against a Texas defense that's still one of the nation's best? Am I perhaps looking past the issues that Texas has had at times defending the run? And maybe that's going to play perfectly into Arkansas's hand and what they want to do and how they want to embrace the hog. Maybe. I can't say embrace the hog enough, and I'm going to bring it up whenever I possibly can. I'm still going to say that Texas is going to force some of those mistakes with Arkansas's passing game. And by the way, Texas has allowed more than 175 passing yards once all season, and it was the Michigan game. The Michigan game, when everybody realized that Michigan had a real quarterback problem, Texas, that was their worst game against the pass this year. That group should feast on 3rd and longs. It's really tempting to say Arkansas gets up off the mat. You know, they give Texas a down-to-the-wire fight. I could definitely see a world in which it's a 3-point game. But I'm going to go Texas to win kind of big, 35-17. Maybe it's a little bit close early. Maybe we do get a Quinn Ewers pick in the first quarter. But I think Texas pulls away late.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And, you know, I've talked all season about Travis Williams, how much I respect him. But he's had like a couple of interesting performances.
Not great.
You know, it's like with a defense, you could often go, okay, what is this team good at, right? Like at least they can do that. With his defense, it feels like, you know, they are kind of looking for an identity, which is weird because I would have said they had that like early in the season. And when you have this great schemer like Sark, and that's kind of the point I was making. Like I've had so many conversations with different fan groups, and they're like, yeah, Quinn Ewers is mid, whatever. It's like, buddy, you better believe that Quinn Ewers is good, because if you think he's mid and he's doing this, Arch Manning going to be mid probably in a couple years. You know what I'm saying? So same deal here, which is that, you know, if you're going to go kind of tie goes to the better coaching staff, I think right now, you know, given kind of a situation in Florida where they did have a defense that was putting it together with similar style, that 3-3-5 tight. So I think it's two teams that are kind of similar in back-to-back weeks. Obviously not quarterback, right? But it's the fact that they've already seen a lot of these things from a defensive standpoint. I think Sark's probably going to eat again.
I would think so. And for what it's worth, if you're wondering about that Texas playoff resume moving forward, something that's going to be dissected in every game that they play, especially if one gets lopsided, which maybe this will, maybe this won't. What's undeniable right now is that Texas is getting tremendous respect by the selection committee. Mm-hmm. Do they deserve it? It's a really similar argument to Penn State. Really, really similar. They're sitting there at number 3.
Well, if they beat Michigan, so...
So did 5 other teams, or 4 other teams, I guess. They're 5-5.
Before we give Judge Franklin too much credit, I just want to see that Steve Sarkisian was able to beat Michigan.
I mean, look, 1 year sample size, a little bit different to judge Penn State based on that, and a Michigan team that won a national championship last year. But like, you can think that they are overrated right now. Mm-hmm. For the sake of our discussions, I am trying not to waste too much of my breath on the Texas and Penn State resume discussion and simply look at what the selection committee is telling us week after week. I think sitting there at number 3 for Texas, even if they lose to A&M, and maybe it's a close game that they lose, that obviously would bode a lot better as opposed to having a blowout loss and then you get left out of the SEC championship. But if they lose like a close game to A&M, I still think they're going to be given a really strong opportunity to make the field, even if A&M at 10-2 and Georgia both have the head-to-head as 2 lost teams, and they would, in theory, get in over Texas. But I just think a lot of people right now are kind of scratching their head going, what is the selection committee telling us about Texas and Penn State for that? They're telling us that they think they're awesome. They think they passed the eye test, and they don't really care about the lack of quality wins or the fact that Texas's best win right now, Colorado State, undefeated in Mountain West play. Is that kind of it? And I still think it's impressive to go into Michigan and win the way that they did in Ann Arbor, despite the fact that it's a very different year for Michigan. I fully acknowledge that, but I think that's going to be the discussion that'll be had with all of these Texas games moving forward. And if you don't want to get too upset with announcers that don't really know a whole lot about the playoff discussion, but they just kind of shoot from the hip from, I think we'll try and bring that context on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I can't fault anybody for not understanding this. It's kind of like the basketball tournament in the NBA. It's like you hear it's
play-in,
like, huh?
Or the play-in or the in-season tournament.
The in-season tournament.
Oh yeah. I don't get that at all.
How does this? I'm gonna give everybody like a year or maybe even 2 of grace period, because there's still times I'll text you like, now if this team does this, and there's so many tiebreakers, and so yeah, I mean, I will say, the most random dub for Texas was Georgia taking that loss to Ole Miss, because now it's like, well, look, you don't have to put Georgia ahead of us. So yeah, it's like so many things have happened that put us here.
What was it though? What if Georgia wins out though? What if Georgia wins out and then you're only competing, like Georgia has its spot and you're not really competing with them for a spot? It's kind of what we're going to get into with the LSU Alabama situation. And all of a sudden, like if Georgia just has its spot and then it's Texas versus everyone else, and you just have to beat A&M to be able to kind of like earn that spot, does that change it? Maybe all of a sudden, Georgia losing is actually bad for Texas. Like there's just so many different layers to all of the cluster right now at the top of the SEC.
And we get to see too. Now, granted, this is a 2-loss Alabama team, but like I've often wondered the brands in the SEC, how the new committee and the new system is going to view them. And so, all that being said, Texas, being ranked this high kind of goes to show. Like I think that's great. That's great news for them. Is where I'm going, is that like whoever is campaigning for them is doing a great job, and that their brand, because it's not like this is the classic. If Kentucky or Arkansas had the same resume as Texas, they'd be nowhere. So
Ward Manuel campaigning for Texas,
yeah,
maybe campaigning for Indiana, saying this is your win. It looks so unbelievably good. Everybody's sitting there at the table. Guys, we don't have any quality wins for Texas. What are we doing here? Ward Manuel's like, I beg your pardon. The Wolverines are the defending national champs. How dare you say anything negatively about them? By the way, let's just put Indiana ahead of Tennessee. Let's do that. And Ward Manuel is the one banging the drum for the quality of wins.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I think you're ready to discuss LSU in Florida. I think you are.
Oh, I do want to do a quick playoff thing first. Look, if this holds and Alabama travels to Indiana, you got to go to that game.
Buddy. When I saw that, and I have been critical of the fact that on the ranking show that they are showing us this live bracket. I'm just of the belief, just give us the rankings and then do the bracket afterwards. Don't try and do it during it. I laughed out loud when I saw that. I thought to myself,
you gotta go to the ultimate and be like, hey, either I'm going to this game or I'm gonna be there hammered, because this is an Indiana home playoff game if everything holds.
For a month, if that matchup is set up with Alabama going to Indiana for a college football playoff game, I'll just be pinching myself for a month to say, all right, wake up. This isn't real. This isn't something that's actually happening. I pictured the scene of my cousin, a senior at Indiana, walking up Indiana Avenue right there, going to the tailgate fields, and then going into the stadium and realizing that Indiana is hosting Alabama in a college football playoff game. Maybe there's snow on the ground in Bloomington. What is this universe? This universe doesn't exist, and we're being told it does.
I might be there with you, man. So some of those like pinstripe overalls, Randall L jersey, rooting against the Tide. Let's do it together.
The candy stripes. That's what we call it.
There we go.
Yeah. All right.
Now let's talk about my terrible football team.
Number 22 LSU, 4.5-point favorite against Florida. The over-under I have is 11.8 yards per carry for DJ Lagway. It's pretty high, Will. It's pretty high.
That's so disrespectful.
That is what LSU is allowing to quarterbacks since Marcel Reed stepped onto that football field in College Station. Yeah, 21 carries, 247 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns by quarterbacks against LSU in that 5.5 quarter stretch. Yikes. Basura. Triple basura. I'm trying right now. Claire is just learning the word trash, and she's got some bilingual stuff. She says agua instead of water. With the way that they teach her at daycare. And so she has a few Spanish words that she'll say instead of English words. I am really trying to make basura instead of trash a thing in our household. It's been difficult. She gets trash. Basura, I get a very puzzled look. So we're trying. LSU defense. I'll show her a picture of that.
Basura. To at least go with that house or something, because I'd be right there with you. Anyway, yeah, man. You know what's funny? And I texted you this, and like I get some emotional hedge or whatever, but it's like the vibes felt kind of off, like the day before, the day of, and then I am like, okay, Paul Mapinga's starting. It's raining pretty hard, and then I'm like, what needs to happen for Alabama to win this game? I'm like, they need to realize that Jalen Milroe can run.
Yep.
And
Will texted me day of, by the way.
Yeah.
Will texted me day. I've never gotten a text from you day of saying vibes are bad.
Yeah.
Vibes are really, really bad. I do not feel good about this. I know that we both said on the preview pod we think LSU was going to beat Alabama. Will texted me midday, and I think that was I let you be. I let you be in the moment, be present. I wasn't going to just troll you or anything like that, because obviously I was on the record with an LSU pick. You were at least on the record with me in my book saying vibes are bad. This is not a good setup.
It was the easiest process of elimination ever. I was like, we got this fake Tiger. We're starting Paul Mapinga. Our backup interior lineman's hurt. DJ Chester is like the worst interior offensive lineman on PFF. Okay, what needs to go well? What do we need to do well? Well, we need to have different players on the interior, and we need to have like basically different coaching for gaps and run scheme. What does Alabama need to do? They need to realize Jalen Milroe is fast.
Will, can I ask you a question? Okay, and this I will troll you with this.
Okay.
How much NIL money do you think everyone could have pooled together to go back retroactively and get Dominic Williams to be worth the money that Oklahoma gave him?
You know, and knowing Brian Kelly, we would have had some type of locker room scandal. I talked about
True.
that at the time, where now we got a bidding war and we're calling the Canes guys. So, yeah, that's the crazy thing. I have been pretty down the middle of this LSU team. I said they were not going to fool me going into the A&M game, and then it beat Arkansas, which is barely not that impressive. And yeah, it's the mobile quarterbacks, man. It's the fact that LSU is soft, which is crazy considering they're starting Major Burns and Jordan Gilbert, whose whole job is hit people. Last year, the only thing Major Burns did right when we gave up like 15 of 17 first downs or third downs is like, this isn't right, to be clear. Like, this is not like I'm not giving this crew, but the like Major Burns is like, we're gonna bring the physicality. I lowered my head on Milroe. I'm gonna show you can't come in here and push us around. All we needed was for him to be that physical against Jalen Milroe and be like, hey, put a lick on him, let him know he can't do this in your house. Dude. There's that clip of him just like backing up. I'm like, Major Burns, why are you here? Are you trying to get like a master's degree? Like what?
Major Burns had some tough film. Not to dog the guy too much. He had. I think, wasn't it Fowler who called in real time his missed tackle of Lenore Sellers on that long run he had in that game? And Fowler, you never hear a play-by-play guy break it down that way with somebody just making a total whiff on a play like that. It has not been the best year. It just even touching Jalen Milroe.
Sage Ryan. I don't know which
it might have been
touchdown
Sage Ryan. Yeah,
but I remember it was like the first touchdown. I think that was Sage Ryan. But
I think you're right.
Okay. Either
My
or,
bad.
you know, or no, there's not a good LSU safety. Pick one. It could have been Jordan Gilbert too. So point being, you know, and it was funny you bring up Lenore Sellers. Really good point, because when he got hurt, that game changed. They were not stopping Lenore Sellers. He had like a 75-yard rushing guy. So I think we've seen what's wrong with LSU. I say that to say can't stop running quarterback. Super soft. Interior offensive line, basura. Interior defensive line, also basura. Coaching, gap discipline, not good. Boom.
Well, I think Florida, I think anybody with two eyeballs can see those exact points and understand that that's just who LSU is at this point of the year. You're probably not getting a whole lot of reinforcements. The fact that the A&M performance and the Bama performance had a bye week sandwiched in between, one would think Florida's game plan is fairly obvious. My guess is that DJ Lagway plays. That is a guess, okay? We're recording this before availability reports on Wednesday. That is just the vibe that I got with the pre-Texas prep that he went through with the individual work and with the fact that they had him dressed in pregame, even though they knew that they weren't going to play him based on the conversations that they were having with him. I could be wrong on that, but I'm doing this breakdown if he plays because, with all due respect to Aiden Warner, the Yale transfer, I won't bank on him being the first quarterback to beat LSU since 2018. This is a little bit trickier than it might appear for Billy Napier, okay? On one hand, we just laid out the obvious blueprint for success. It could not be a more obvious flaw than what LSU has right now. Run the ball with DJ Lagway, make LSU show that it actually can put a hand on a quarterback after Marcel Reed and Jalen Milroe got every blade of grass that they wanted. Seems obvious. Billy needs a big-time win. Maybe stopping the bleeding against LSU means seeing if LSU can stop the bleeding against the quarterback run game. But there is risk. There is great risk in that, okay? And if these were normal circumstances, go out there, play football, don't think twice about it, all right? You have your personnel. Don't think about what's going to happen 3 months from now, 4 months from now. Your quarterback of the future is coming off a non-contact injury that he suffered trying to make something happen with his legs, okay? I don't think we see Lagway run it a ton, and I think that might be to Florida's detriment. I just have this thought in the back of my mind, and maybe I'm thinking too much of what Aaron Murray said before the Florida-Georgia game, that they were really going to try and be careful with his rushing use, knowing what's behind him, knowing they don't want to get him hurt. And that was before, obviously, he had any sort of injury concern. So I do wonder if we're looking up and wondering why Florida has maybe not had more of the quarterback design runs, and it's not an offense that looks like it's clicking on all cylinders. So I'm not sure if that is going to be the story of the game, but I think that Florida is going to be in a tough spot in what should be a bounce back game for Garrett Nussmeier, because last week against Texas, that depleted secondary that had 3 starting defensive backs out very much looked like it had 3 starting defensive backs out. We saw Quinn Ewers kind of light them up, albeit a better schemer, better weapons, probably at least better weapons Texas has than LSU. That's a little bit debatable, I guess. But how does this not turn into a big Kyron Lacey game? That's what I wonder. How does this not become a game in which he just dominates matchups left and right? Because he's had these moments in more of halves and not full games in which you have wondered who's going to stop that guy. We saw it at the end of the Ole Miss game, obviously, where he just kind of takes over. He can take over and have those spurts. I think he can do it for a full game in this one with the matchup. Maybe LSU just shows up totally defeated after it very likely watched its playoff hopes end. We'll get to that in a second here. But I'm going to pick LSU somewhat reluctantly to bounce back and beat Florida for the 6th consecutive year that would be. I'm going to go LSU 35, Florida 28 shootout.
Yeah, that's interesting about Lagway, because I'm looking actually at his high school stats right now, and he was like a solid runner in high school, but I think we've seen a lot of these guys like Jameis, where it's like, okay, well, you're still, compared to high school kids, you're so much better of an athlete. That's a lot easier for you to run. In college, I haven't really seen that like dual threat, like jump off the page athleticism with Lagway. So to your point, even if he was healthy, I'm not sure that would be the game plan. But him being hurt, yeah, I mean, especially with that non-contact injury, especially with your coach getting extended, you just plant wrong and turn, and it's
not extended. Vote of confidence, two different things.
Good point. He didn't get the Sam Pittman graphic yet, so we'll wait on that. But point being, basically your coach is not coaching for his job unless he really, poops the bed. So point being, there's no reason to go do something that you haven't done before with a guy who hasn't looked super comfortable with it. And the thing about Lagway is like, I just had to go verify his stats, because watching him, he does look a bit statuesque. I'm not saying that can't be part of his game, but you can often see the guys who trust their athleticism versus the guys who trust like their arm strength or their pride. He has often been a guy who will trust like his arm strength. Like if somebody's coming after him, he'll just kind of yeet it and see where it goes. Whereas the more mobile guys will tend to just take off, a la early Jalen Milroe, or the other day Jalen Milroe. So point being, like, I think that's never going to be, not never. I think that for this season, for sure, that ship is kind of sailed as far as him being a mobile guy. Now that being said, this game presents a very interesting kind of inflection point for both of these fan bases, because, okay, speaking of people named DJ Pickett, the like number 1 corner, number 2 corner, depending on who you look at in the class, 5-star that LSU got, is going to be at this game on the Florida sidelines. Now, LSU fans would say they just want to go watch LSU, which is fair, right? But at the same time, this is kind of one of those inflection points like we talked about for Billy Napier, where if he can win this game, because you saw it for the first kind of like half of the season, Florida fans, their names were all fire Billy Napier. They were like, we're not building anything. We can't recruit. We can't do whatever. This is the game that if you want Florida to kind of be taken seriously and start building something for real, you got to win this game. Like straight up, you got to win this game because this is the most beatable. Well, hold on. This is the third most beatable LSU team you could have lost to.
So vulnerable is maybe the better way to phrase it.
Yeah. I mean, those teams in 20 and 21 were bad. This team is better than those teams. There's no Jaden Daniels walking through that door for sure. So this is like middle of the pack. That being said, this is not a team. Even in like last year's game, the game before with Brian Kelly, that the defense was just like awesome, lights out. You know what I'm saying? This was that game that Jaden Daniels had to have dang near 600 yards of total offense to comfortably win that game when he probably shouldn't have been in the fourth quarter based on how things have played out. So the thing that I'm worried about is Nussmeier, just to be honest with you. This is another guy that we thought we knew who he was about halfway through the year. I was telling you, statistically, Nussmeier, whatever. If Nussmeier plays like Carson Beck, might have problems.
Yeah, I agree. And look, if Florida's defense shows up and doesn't look like a total doormat, which I think early on they did some things well against Texas, and then you were quickly able to realize this is a very overmatched group right now, and this is different than who they were even a few weeks earlier, then who knows? Maybe this does turn into a game in which Florida can get LSU. What we know for LSU, there is still a doomsday scenario. If you saw the doomsday scenario that Greg McElroy broke down on his show, he did a really good job of breaking this down, that LSU can get into the SEC championship, perhaps the college football playoff with 3 losses, despite the fact that last week, Alabama, LSU felt very much like an elimination game. Obviously, LSU has to win out. Okay. So that's most important here. Georgia has to beat Tennessee. Alabama, easier to believe, right? We'll get to that in a bit here. Alabama, Ole Miss, and Mizzou all have to win out to get to 10-2.
I believe 2 of those.
Yeah. Okay. And then here's the other kicker. Either Arkansas upsets Texas or Auburn upsets Texas A&M. Just one of those 2 things has to happen to make sure that when Texas and Texas A&M play in the regular season finale, at least one of those teams has 2 conference losses. In that scenario, Will, Alabama, 10-2 overall, 6-2 in conference play. Mizzou, 10-2 overall, 6-2 in conference play. Ole Miss, you get it, 10-2 overall, 6-2 in conference play. Georgia, same thing. Tennessee, same thing. LSU, 9-3 overall, but 6-2 in conference play. And then either Texas or Texas A&M will be 6-2 in conference play at best. That's doomsday. So is it fun knowing that LSU has doomsday possibilities and can just blow this whole thing up and cause the SEC to self-combust?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't require me to watch more of this LSU team. Like if you're telling me, I got to go watch a playoff game, I got to go watch the SEC championship, I'm not interested in that. I am interested in ruining another team's chances, a la the Atlanta Falcons last Sunday. I have kind of, now I'm all for that. I just, I said, especially after this last game, I'm like, let's just sim to the offseason, guys. Let's not embarrass ourselves. We could beat Florida for the millionth time in a row. That'd be great. But let's just not do anything stupid, a la Brian Kelly flipping out on referees. We would never do that. So yeah, I think it's super fun. I think that there are a lot of equally matched teams this year. I just am not putting any more hope into this LSU team.
But you're picking LSU to win this game, right?
Picking LSU to win this game. Okay. And like I said, this is a unique opportunity that this team, like Brian Kelly, could further embarrass us because this was the one team. I started to make the joke about nobody's got a cupcake week. Well, most years this was one for us. I don't know. They might come out and smoke us too. But based on everything that I think I know, Florida doesn't really even have. I'm not even going to say that because some of this stuff is just game by game. I think that the stuff that Florida has been good at on defense hasn't been massive interior pressure. And now we can start asking the question, how did LSU handle Ole Miss the way they did? Goodness, because they look like a sieve against these last 2 teams. Again, makes more sense against A&M. But point being, I don't really think personnel-wise, Florida has it on, at least on defense. Now, again, coaching can be all of this. This could be a game where Billy Napier just eats Brian Kelly's lunch. I could possibly see that. But that being said, the logical part of my brain says that your score is about accurate, and it might even get into the 40s, honestly, because I don't see I started saying I don't see either of these teams getting a stop, but I mean, if Nussmeier plays like that, that's an easy way. So I think it's going to be a chaotic, fun game. I don't want to see Lagway run at all, but I think this is going to be another sloppy, fun LSU-Florida game.
Let's go to Mizzou and South Carolina. Number 23 Mizzou, number 21 South Carolina. South
They
Carolina.
really sandwiched us between those two teams to prove a point. It's like you're right between South Carolina, who you beat, and Mizzou, who I always make fun of.
Yeah, LSU sitting there at 22. Yeah, 21, 22, 23. I could just throw Vandy in there at 25 just for fun. They decided not
They're
to
better
do
than
that.
us. I don't want to play them.
I'm just saying.
Maybe not them.
Diego Pavia, quarterback run game, LSU. That would not be
I do
fun.
not want to see Diego Pavia.
Yeah. South Carolina's 12.5-point favorite. The over-under I have, Will, is 14.8 South Carolina points. 14.8. That can happen.
Okay.
That's what the Gamecocks are averaging in this 5-game losing streak against Mizzou. Drinks never lost South Carolina. 4-0. My favorite trivia fact about this game during this 5-year streak, which has favored Mizzou. Who was the last quarterback to beat Mizzou in a South Carolina uniform?
Oh my gosh. I honestly couldn't even begin to guess that. Is it Shaw? No.
Michael Scarnecchia. That's right. Yeah. Michael Scarn.
Our boy. Yeah.
Doing well right now, maybe. No idea. Anyways, Will, I've got playoff thoughts on this one. Is it funny to talk about playoff thoughts with a game like this? Perhaps. But look, I don't believe either of these teams have a playoff path, okay? Though I do believe, and both things can be true at the same time, I believe South Carolina could very well be better than multiple teams who end up making the playoff. And I would probably pick South Carolina to beat those teams on a neutral site. But getting blown out by Ole Miss, that still happened. It wasn't a bad loss for South Carolina, but it's entirely different if you were discussing 3 nail-biter losses against quality foes compared to like 2 quality losses and 1 blowout loss. You know, if it's just, we're literally 3 plays away, but that's not the case. You can't even make that case. Plus, the problem for South Carolina is that if it wins out and if it beats Mizzou and Clemson, it'll knock both of those teams out of the college football playoff top 25, right? Like Mizzou, with a loss, is going to fall out of the top 25. Clemson, if it suffers a 3rd loss and does so against South Carolina, is going to fall out of the top 25, meaning that South Carolina will likely, if it goes 9-3, only have 1 CFP top 25 win, albeit a dominant one against a respected Texas A&M squad. I just think that South Carolina won't hurdle teams with the head-to-head, because Alabama, Ole Miss, and then even like being 1 spot ahead of 3-loss LSU right now, that at least has some resistance. McElroy brought it up on the ranking show that, wow, why is South Carolina ahead of LSU when LSU went into Columbia and won that football game? We don't need to get into a discussion about whether or not that was deserved or not. But reality, both these teams are at least fighting for respect. They're always fighting for respect, okay? So regardless of, and I get it, if the playoff conversation warrants it near the end of this broadcast, they'll get into it and they'll discuss the credentials. Why can't South Carolina make the playoff? You know that'll happen if this is a lopsided type game. You can earn respect in this game, even if the playoff isn't on the table, all right? You can still earn respect by being a 9-win team, which South Carolina can still be in the regular season, and win a game as a top 25 team against the top 25 team. I need to come up with a proper metric for this. Maybe someone has come up with this, but it's not a how do you like me now win, but it's a everybody's watching us win.
Yeah.
There's a better name out there for it, okay? But I like that stat because I think it can show why a team might feel like it never cracks national conversations outside of an upset here or there. Right? Mm-hmm. Like last year, I kept bringing up for Mizzou, the biggest thing that they had to overcome was getting one of those wins. And for the first time in 9 years, Mizzou beat an AP top 25 team as an AP top 25 team, did that by destroying Tennessee. Looks like it was maybe going to happen against LSU. That didn't end up happening. Mm-hmm. So I brought it up earlier in the year for South Carolina because if they had beaten LSU in that game, they would have entered the top 25 and had a slew of ranked games ahead to try and really build something and really get that respect that they covet. That didn't happen, obviously. The last time that South Carolina beat an AP top 25 team as an AP top 25 team, 2014. Beat number 6 Georgia. It's been 10 years, man. That is the only such instance in the playoff era that South Carolina has beat an AP top 25 team as an AP top 25 team. They got blown out in a top 25 matchup against Georgia 2018. That was kind of a trendy early season upset pick to say South Carolina is going to upset Georgia. Did not come close to happening. They lost in the Wild Bowl game a couple of years ago to Tyler Buckner, Notre Dame, 2022. Beamer vented about South Carolina not being ranked, after beating Vandy. And he's right to feel slighted based on who they've been this year. But he knows as well as anyone, okay? It is awfully difficult to shake perception of teams and people in this sport, wherein perception is often reality. I think South Carolina starts getting even more people to realize that it's not just a spunky team who can show up for a night game at home. This is an imposing defensive line that can play anywhere, anytime. And right now, this 1-2 punch with Lenora Sellers and Rocket Sanders is fun. It is really, really fun to watch. I think they can execute a similar game plan to what Alabama did to Mizzou a few weeks ago. Not sure about Brady Cook's status. Drew Pine shut me up down the stretch with what he did against Oklahoma. Nice job by Kirby Moore scheming as well with extra time. I'll take South Carolina to win by double digits. But I'm going to give some respect to the Mizzou winning streak. I'm going to say that they don't quite cover. South Carolina wins 24-14.
I am going to agree with 85% of what you said, but I do want one big, different caveat here. I actually think that the national perception of these two teams is different because of those games. So, and in in a weird technicality sense, right? Because plenty of people thought that South Carolina played well enough to win against LSU. And for game day, the atmosphere looked awesome. You know what I'm saying? They showed up for that moment with a backup quarterback nonetheless. And the weird play at the end. I think that South Carolina has had enough of these just insane upset wins, even specifically under Beamer. Let's just throw LSU in a different pile because it wasn't a win. But A&M this year, blowout, crazy win. The 2 in 22, Tennessee, Clemson. Yeah. And the thing about the Tennessee one is it was so bad that people tuned in. It was I got to go watch Tennessee lose. And so everybody got over there and they just kept smoking them. It wasn't oh, this is a back and forth game. We put it on a multi-view. It was this is crazy. I remember where it was. I was they're still doing this. Oh, all right. And so point being I think that Beamer has already gotten a little bit more of that love than Drink. And from Drink's standpoint, it's I keep smoking this guy. What does it matter? It's no, I think you're right. It's that Mizzou has kind of been turtling all season with, they start off with the high ranking. People are watching them as a ranked team. They're not doing great with the target on their back. They almost lost to Vandy back when that was not cool to do. They just have all these weird games. At Florida last year was another great example with Mizzou. Where it's oh, you're over the hump. You had this great game against Tennessee. Oh no, Florida is now going to beat you, and they didn't, obviously. But point being, Mizzou has gotten this tag as this team that whenever their expectations, they go under them. Whereas South Carolina has remained an interesting and fun team, I feel. Even when they couldn't exactly figure it out, the running backs, their tight ends, they had the weird returns, they had the punt block. So I think I'm with you, but I think that our average ape brain is just consumers. I don't think we're viewing it as ranked team versus ranked team. It's quote unquote big game. And I think that South Carolina under Beamer has showed up at those in a kind of a wild. I don't know who I could really compare that to. Maybe old boy, what's it? Who is it? Who's it? Pitt, not Dazio. Who's the Pitt coach?
Pat Narduzzi.
Narduzzi, there we go. Narduzzi, it's oh, I feel I get one of these a year out of him, and so they always are kind of hanging around. And I think Beamer has kind of gotten that same thing. So yeah, for the same reason, then this game, I like South Carolina, and I think that I weirdly trust them despite the quarterback situation, despite all the things that have happened. So yeah, I don't know. I'm right there with you in that these two teams are similar in a way, and that they're always kind of in this same we've seen great teams, we've seen really talented players, we've even seen great quarterbacks, I would argue, out of both of these teams. But in the modern era, they haven't consistently put it together. But I think that South Carolina has been responsible for more fun moments, even going all the way back to Garcia.
Yeah, they have established themselves now as a team that you can flip on a given Saturday. Mm-hmm. But appointment viewing to watch them from start to finish is still a little bit tougher to come by. And you win games like this. And this is, in the past, been the game that, all right, South Carolina, maybe they get into the top 25. Maybe they feel like they're building some momentum. And then Mizzou is just right there to take the rug out from under them. That's who they have been. They have been the thorn in Beamer's side. And in many ways, Mizzou has been the team that has prevented South Carolina from getting to those heights. And so in a game like this, when in theory, they should have a huge advantage up front, whether it's Drew Pine or whether it's a less than 100% Brady Cook. You would think that defensive line should feast. And if you don't find a way to win this one, then you will go back to kind of getting, you know what, you're nothing more than frisky. South Carolina needs to show that it's more than frisky. You need to show that they're a good football team, and they have done that in a lot of different weeks. They certainly showed it, I think, over the course of the last month plus. Can you show it in a game like this with the historical significance of ending that Mizzou losing streak? That's a very important question for Shane Beamer to answer.
And I'll make one more point about this too, really quick, which is, you know what actually just kind of like is unfortunate about this matchup is that if you are like a big time national guy and you're not like dialed into matchups like this, it would be so easy to write off whoever wins this game as the other team was like not good. But we've seen to this
because they'll fall out of the top 25.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what's so weird. It's like we're guaranteeing whoever loses this game is out of the top 25.
Yep.
And so whenever we go back to the ranking, that team's not rather not any good. And that sucks because both of these teams, you could argue Mizzou is kind of underwhelmed this year. That is due in part to quarterback health and factor like lots of different random things. But like to act like, you can't fool me. It's like, no, these teams have been fighting all year. Like it's already this deep into the season. We're mid-November and both of these teams are ranked in the SEC. Pretty impressive.
This would be heads and shoulders above anything Mizzou has done all year. If they go into Columbia and beat this team with the disadvantages we believe that they have, if they won a game like this, it would be, oh my gosh, I mean, more impressive, so much more impressive than anything that they have done. It's just the spread is what it is because they have not looked the part against top 25 teams. And that's why it's sitting there at 12.5, even though Beamer, he's got to get over the Mizzou hump. This seems like a good time to do it. All right. Number 7, Tennessee. Number 12, Georgia. Georgia's a 10-point favorite. Keep an eye on that line because, buddy, it feels like it's going to be changing a whole lot. The over-under I have is 3 references to this being a playoff elimination game. You might agree with that. You might disagree with that. I think it's one thing to sit here and talk about how Georgia's schedule has been, in my opinion, as tough as any contender in the sport. I think that there are a lot of different metrics that would agree with that. It's been an absolute gauntlet to have 4 games against teams that are currently in the CFP top 25 and all of them being away from home. All right. That is significant. As Georgia fans have noted, 4 of those games, yet they have only played 3 home games total this year to this point.
Really quick, I'm sorry. Can I make a point? Because we had a listener hit me up about this. Like, what does Georgia have to do to get more night games? And actually, Georgia's schedule, like just kind of how they are, is very interesting because their rivalry games, like Tech, I'm not exactly dialed into exactly what's going to happen there, but Tech has been surprisingly good, but they're not like a powerhouse.
They played it as a night game. They've played that as a night game before.
Yeah. But that's like when you think about their games that could be rivalry games, right? Or not rivalry games that could be night games, okay? Tech, it's been a night game, but Tech has kind of been up and down. Tennessee for sure is one, right? But Florida, Georgia is always going to be in Jacksonville, so they're never going to get that at home. And then furthermore, they're going to play about a game a year at the Benz. So that only leaves but so many teams that they could actually host in a night game for a game day atmosphere, which ergo then becomes, Georgia, doesn't have a good home atmosphere. Where in reality, it's just this weird scheduling quirk where like the rivals don't compete with them.
And I think that was part of the motivation for why they've really beefed up their non-con, the home and homes that they have coming up in the 2020s. They will get those premier non-conference games. And I think that will be part of the sell for having some of those early season night games. So maybe that will take care of it. The new SEC schedule will help take care of some of that as well. But yeah, this year it has just not been favorable. I mean, a really, really tough draw and something that, like, I don't know if an elite Georgia team would handle this flawlessly. And certainly this Georgia team is far from.
And conversally, they got to go when they go on the road. It's always a night game. Like, that's I get it. Actually, I thought I was like, this is gotta be, no, this actually makes a lot of sense. They end up playing a lot of road night games and not many. Anyway,
I think as much as we feel like Georgia's schedule deserves the benefit of the doubt, you look at Georgia being at number 12, and by the way, they're the first team out. Remember that because it's the 12-team playoff. But number 13, Boise State, would be one of the 5 highest ranked conference champs. It would get that final spot. I look at that and go, how can Georgia lose this game and still make the playoff? By beating 4-loss Georgia Tech, a respected Georgia Tech team who just handed Miami its first loss. I fully acknowledge that. But look,
But they're second in a row.
yeah, right. Yeah, they're second in like Georgia
To
lose
Miami,
to,
like Georgia Tech is now 2-0 against Miami in the last
oh
2
yeah,
games, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
so
yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about like Georgia losing its second consecutive game,
No,
which
no.
by the way, it's been a minute since that happened. I'll get to that in a bit here.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Heather Dinich talked on McAfee about not ruling out a 3-loss SEC team in the playoff. But to me, that's just it's like a chaos scenario for LSU and not a whole lot else. Okay. And for Tennessee, right? For Tennessee, Vols got jumped by Indiana and BYU, even though nobody in that group faced a ranked team, and they all won. And we'll get to that with Bear as well. But if the Vols lose this one, I'm not sure that the selection committee would value that resume, even though obviously Alabama is a great win. And if both Alabama and Tennessee have 2 losses and are on the outside looking in of the SEC championship, buddy, you thought that rivalry's been intense before. Wait until they're fighting over a playoff spot and one has the head-to-head and one doesn't. And the Tide, of course, they will argue, well, hey, we have 4 wins against teams that are currently in the CFP top 25. That'll go down to 3 with the loser of Mizzou, South Carolina. Maybe LSU has another loss the rest of the way. Maybe they fall in the top 25. Who knows? I'm not trying to troll, but that is just reality. But that's going to be a nasty debate if that happens because the Vols have the head-to-head, which has to count for something, obviously. The problem is that they don't have another win versus a team in the current CFP top 25, nor do they really have another chance for one. You know, if you're looking at their schedule, you're like, none of those wins are going to turn into top 25 wins either. So we'll sort all of that out if that situation presents itself. Until then, I expect Alabama fans and Tennessee fans to act totally civil on the internet. Of course, they will do that. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
But look, yes, this will have the feel of an elimination game. Okay. The big question coming into this one is Nico, right? Bear, who we will talk to in a bit here, went on with UGAsports.com and said this. This is the full quote. If you just saw one little snippet or something like this, is the full quote of what he said. He said, I don't know what you've heard about Nico Iamaleava playing this week. I have heard that it was a bad concussion, and people that I have spoken to do not believe that he is going to play. We'll see what happens. Josh Heupel certainly offered a different tune, as you would expect him to do early in the week, to probably just have Georgia prepare as if Nico were going to play. Have the College Football Playoff Selection Committee prepare to rank them as if they were going to have their starting quarterback for this game. Maybe my intel is wrong, and maybe he is fine. Hopefully for his sake and for the health of him in the long-term future, I hope it wasn't a bad concussion. I hope he's okay. I hope college football fans get to see him out there on Saturday. Close quote. All right. In addition to that, Trey Wallace reported that Nico stayed in the locker room in the second half because if you've seen these college football stadiums, what they are, it's basically a rave the rest of the way. And that's not ideal if you're dealing with concussion symptoms at all, okay?
You ever been hit by a strobe light with a concussion? Because I haven't. It's horrible.
That seems terrible. No, thank you. Keep me in the locker room. Buddy, drive me miles away from the stadium. I don't even want to hear that noise if I got a concussion. So
I think I told you about this. Sorry, quick story because it's super related. I think I told you the story. The minute I realized I had a concussion from MMA, I was covering the Magic, and they did the walkouts. And
oh, buddy.
Aaron Gordon. Boom, boom, boom. And I went, this is a concussion. I know exactly what this is.
Good Lord. That's a tough realization. Confirmed concussion. I am going through my own concussion protocol. I am self-diagnosing. Yes, definitely.
Literally.
Yeah, by the way, Pete Thamel also said that Nico is in concussion protocol as of Tuesday. We were recording this on Wednesday. He practiced, but his status is still to be determined. Here's the thing. Bear doesn't just make up all that stuff, okay? Never. If you say that's just clickbait, why did he say that on somebody else's airwaves on Tuesday instead of saying that on one of his variety of platforms? Bear Bets podcast, which, by the way, shameless plug, he doesn't even record that until Wednesday. I'm not saying that means Bear is 100% right, but I am saying that he's getting that type of intel because that's significant in the eyes of Vegas, and that's what Bear has a really, really good pulse on. Here's what I want to know. Healthy or not, is Nico ready to go out and make big-time throws on the road in that atmosphere? Last road game, Arkansas, a long time ago. Other road game, great early against Oklahoma, leaned on that defense late with a lead. In 4 halves of true road games that Nico has played, that's it right now at this point. Georgia fans talking about haven't had any home games. Tennessee fans, you can't complain about the fact that your boy hasn't really had to travel on the road very much, okay? The schedule is set up well for that. But in 4 halves of true road games, I think he's played 1 solid half of football. First half against Oklahoma. Georgia, in case you forgot, still hasn't lost at home since 2019. Since the start of 2017, Georgia's 44-1 at Sanford Stadium. Shout out Will Muschamp, Ryan Helinski. Dobbs nailed boot in 2016. That's still the last time that Tennessee beat Georgia. Even more telling, during this 7-game win streak that Georgia's had against Tennessee, Vols haven't even been within one score in the fourth quarter since that happened. So knowing that, and knowing how lopsided these games have been, consider this. 3 games versus Georgia. That's what Josh Heupel's had. His offense, 4 total touchdowns, 2 of which came in the first 4.5 minutes of games, or came in the final 4.5 minutes of games that were already at least 21-point margins. The other 2 came in the first 3 minutes on Tennessee's opening drive. So in all 3 games that Josh Heupel has faced Georgia and faced Kirby Smart, Tennessee has had at least a 53-minute stretch without a touchdown. All 3 games, okay? That's what it looks like when a guy has your number. Now, maybe this is the time that the dam breaks because Lord knows this isn't the same Georgia team that those 3 were. And, even going back to 2017, this is a different Georgia team that we're talking about, all right? I fully acknowledge that. Georgia's corners, they've been getting beat. And maybe that's the way that Heupel's offense, it thrives, it gets going. Look, maybe they can know where those mismatches are at the line of scrimmage. It's not a whole lot of post-snap stuff for Nico, and Tennessee is able to get going, and they're able to attack downfield in ways that we haven't seen in a while. But I can't bank on that no matter who starts at quarterback for Tennessee, okay? I will bank on the Tennessee defensive line making life difficult on Carson Beck because why wouldn't I bank on that? But a repeat of that Ole Miss blueprint feels a little bit tougher to pull off in Athens. Also, I criticized Georgia's run defense. They struggled a bit, I thought, with Jarquez Hunter. He had the long touchdown with the missed tackles on that play. 4 games since then, 89 rushing yards per game allowed, 2.8 yards per carry allowed in that stretch. This could be tough sledding for Dylan Sampson on the road. I'm going Georgia by 13, Will. Ugly 27-14 win for Georgia. Georgia avoids losing twice on consecutive Saturdays without a bye. So without a bye separating. The last time that happened was Dobbs nailed boot.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where I feel like, as random as everything has been in the SEC, I do feel like Tennessee has been pretty consistent. And you could call that good, you could call that
calling
bad.
it upset, Will?
No. I'm saying consistently their quarterback play has struggled. I think that if Tennessee shows up and is just carving Georgia up defensively, we've seen a lot of shocking stuff. But it would be right up there, right? With, Georgia, what Georgia did to Texas pretty much, right? And so, point being, I understand the strengths that Tennessee has, and they've been constant. That's the thing. In their loss to Arkansas, Dylan Sampson, pretty solid game. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're a team that has strengths and weaknesses. And, Nico, we talked about him kind of being able to air it out, stuff like that, but with the concussion, that even makes things more. I don't know there's a human on earth. Like, you could argue there are some people, it's like, oh yeah, break a rib on Joe Burrow, he might get better. I don't think there's a human on earth that gets better with a concussion when it comes to throwing a football, right? So, point being, I think that in this environment, against a motivated Georgia defense, which as we see is a little bit different, especially after last week, the whole thing about losing 2 games in a row, under Kirby, the amount of butt chewing they're getting this week, a lot of which is dedicated to that kid who was jumping up and down, which, if that's
what an idiot, in the words of Kirby.
If that's your biggest problem, all right.
Georgia's got bigger problems than that.
Yeah, that was immediately my take. I was like, I probably shouldn't do that. Okay, but also, anyway, so point being, we know Kirby's not happy, and yeah, it would be a wild, amazing, fun story for Josh Heupel to come in there and avenge what he did, a couple years ago in the rain, and the way that their offense kind of, and their playoff chances didn't die in that game. That was a South Carolina game. They were still at 5 for that game, if I remember correctly. But point being, I would love for the story element for Tennessee to win this game, but I don't think it's possible just based on who we have known. Now, I want to be clear. I didn't get to face any of the wrong stuff I said last week, and I fully get that because I already said this about Kirby and Lane Kiffin. But at some point, water has to find its level with Georgia, right? Where it's hey, didn't pick you guys against Texas. Everybody was kind of drinking the Kool-Aid for Texas as kind of an upset in that way, right? And then last week, it's kind of the inverse where Ole Miss does that to you. One thing I will say is that it has been a rough week in Georgia practice. I can guarantee that for you.
Yeah.
And I think that we always say, tips and overthrows. I think that Nico is definitely good for a couple of those in this game with that opportunistic Georgia defense. I do worry about Georgia running the ball. I worry about them protecting Carson Beck. I'm sure Carson Beck's going to have about 2 picks. Like I'm not saying this is a standard Georgia team. I'm simply saying that the weakness of both of these teams, this is so funny to think about with how the season started. Weakness of the consistency is quarterback play has not been where we need it to be. Nico, it feels, is getting worse because of injury. Beck, you're kind of getting to a point where you're worried about, like, if he has another sticker, you think about benching him, to be honest, because you just can't keep doing that. So the kind of the last, like, walk the plank for this regime, offensive coordinator, won't say his name, Kirby Smart and Carson Beck. Not saying Kirby Smart's getting fired, just saying there's going to have to be a shakeup.
Kirby Smart on the hot seat. Some are saying.
No. I'm saying he will go in and fire everyone. I've seen that Nick Saban move before, where he walks in and goes, "All right, well, y'all thought this was sweet. You're out of here." So that's all I'm saying is that, like, to avoid that, I think his team is good enough to avoid that. I'm going to take Georgia big by, and again, to your point, ugly, not pretty, but big. I'd say about 2 touchdowns.
Like I have 27 points for Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Could they finish with 275 yards of offense and just reap the benefits of short fields and turnovers and stuff? Yes, absolutely. That's more of the type of game that I think we will have. I think both teams end up having multiple turnovers. It would not surprise me at all if this is a game in which it's survive in advance and neither team feels particularly good about its weaknesses after the fact, but it just feels good to be able to survive. And Tennessee, maybe it wants to win an ugly game in this version of Josh Heupel and this team and what it's become. But it's now or never. And look, if you are sitting there at 3 losses, Georgia, I get that your schedule is brutal. I don't know that I want to hear a whole lot of 3-loss arguments. Okay. I don't know that I want to hear them. And you will acknowledge if your team loses that this has not been the Georgia team that you hope for. So I don't want to then hear 2 weeks later after beating Georgia Tech, well, we had to play this team. I get it. That's brutal, but at some point you have to win these significant games. And Georgia did its part by winning in Austin, and that's why they're still sitting here with a favorable draw to be able to get in with 2 losses. But this should be treated like everything and not like, oh yeah, we still have another loss to give. What do you mean? With 3 losses, team, we should be fine. I think the situation is different after the way that they lost against Ole Miss.
If you lose this one, maybe be a Georgia fans can commiserate here and say, we don't want to watch our teams anymore. Let's just move on to the next team. No more Carson Beck. No more weird picks. Let's no more weird pick Garrett Nussmeier either. Let's just give somebody else a chance.
There you go. All right. Fate of the week. Let's get to a team that Georgia fans might have their eye on, actually, with how close they are in the college football playoff rankings. Technically a whiff if you faded last week. I had Georgia Tech covering against Miami, and Georgia Tech wins outright. San Jose State getting 13.5 at home against Boise State. Okay. Everyone is talking about Boise State not just making the playoff, but maybe getting a first-round bye in the college football playoff, which is wild to think that could be on the table for a group of 5 team. All eyes, obviously, on Ashton Genty. Meanwhile, San Jose, solid football team. Lost in double OT on the road against one loss, Washington State. They run the spread and shred offense. Yeah. Just when you think fun and gun can't ever be beat. I'm not saying it beats it, but spread and shred that's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good.
That's fire. I love coaches, man. Like, it's either cringe or it's the coolest thing you've ever heard. There's no in between.
Yeah, speaking of coaches, Ken Niamaleava. I can never say his name. I can say Iamaleava. I can say Uyunglele. I can say Tungavaloa. I can never say his name. Niamaleava. Got it. Former Navy coach. You know who I'm talking about. Doing really nice work at San Jose State after Brent Bennett took the Arizona job. Here's what I wonder about with Genty as he tries to make this push for the Heisman. In his last 3 games, without a bye week in between, mind you, 36 touches, 33 touches, 36 touches. His endurance has been unreal, all right? If he ends up winning the Heisman Trophy, I don't think that'll happen, but if he ends up even just getting to New York, his endurance will be a huge, huge thing working in his favor. The guy has 496 rushing yards in the fourth quarter alone. In the fourth quarter, he's averaging 9.4 yards per carry, 8 rushing touchdowns. All 3 of those stats lead FBS if you just include running backs with at least 25 carries in the fourth quarter. Does that catch up to him in November? He's already got more carries than he had all of last year. Can San Jose State make it tougher on him with its pretty solid 3.65 yards per carry allowed? Perhaps the more interesting stat for San Jose State, fourth quarter, San Jose State has allowed 1 rushing touchdown in 9 games, and nobody has had a 20-yard run in the fourth quarter against San Jose State. I don't think they'll necessarily break. I'm not saying they contain Ashton Genty, but I think they keep it within 2 touchdowns. So that's the fate of the week for you.
500 fourth quarter rushing yards, huh? Must be nice.
Must be nice.
Rules.
All right, let's kick it to Bear Fallica. Just a heads up, we set this up a week ago, so this wasn't a situation where I was like, oh, I saw what you said about Nico. You want to come on the pod? No, if you could believe it, we actually set this up before the Miami game, before Miami had even lost. So want to talk about that, Cam Ward, some gambling stuff as well. So here's Bear. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Bear Fallica. It's great to see you, man, but be honest, have you been bullied off the internet by Vol Twitter yet?
Yeah, so I was able to access your invite on my Twitter DMs. So apparently I still have an active Twitter account, which is good. It's always fun. I love going through the responses to me what I said on the pod with Coach Donnan and Dane Tuesday. Like, I was okay. I'm not making it up. Like, someone told me that he had a concussion. He's been in protocol, and likelihood of him playing wasn't good. So if I'm wrong, then I'll be happily come out and say, hey, my intel was wrong. I'm glad he's healthy. I'm glad he's playing. But yeah, I got no reason kind of to make this up. But I did like the some of the better, the highlights amongst the responses from the Big Orange Nation was. Why should we care what that fat, nice 4-letter word has to say? He was fired from ESPN. Good. Yeah, I am a little overweight. Yeah, I'll give you that. But no, I was far from fired from ESPN and got a very nice contract from Fox. In when my ESPN contract was up, and then the other one was. Why should we listen to him? He's going to be wrong anyway, like he always is on FanDuel with his picks. And last time I checked, I didn't have like the FanDuel deal to give picks on FanDuel. I have my thing with Big Noon Kickoff where we put a parlay up on every week for the Big Noon Kickoff show that I give. But maybe they're confusing me either with Gronk and his touchdown spike, or maybe even Kay Adams on FanDuel. So it's always good to. No publicity is bad publicity, right? We'll see what happens. Hopefully Nico's healthy, and hopefully he'll be out there, but I have my doubts.
Let the record show you want Nico to play.
Yes!
It's a better football game.
Of course.
If Nico plays. You're not throwing this out there trying to speak it into existence. No, and you are also, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't ever remember a time in which you've gone on the record with intel kind of like that early in the week. And remember as well, if this is all self-seeking, you're doing it on one of your own shows, right, which all come out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, exactly, and not doing it on somebody else's airways, UGAsports.com. Like you're not doing that just for the sake of doing it. Like, is there ever an instance in which you were kind of on the record with something like that early in the week?
No, it's funny because I think back to the year, I guess it would have been 2007 or 6 when Kirk Herbstreit on game day, like the whole Les Miles, he's going to be the head coach at Michigan, and then it didn't happen. And Kirk's not in the breaking news business, and I'm not in the breaking news business. All I know is I woke up to a text on Monday, like, yeah, hey, guys, not thinking Nico's not going to play, concussion. All right, fine, someone I trust, but it's a man. Look. Maybe I hope he plays, but it's funny because there are a lot of times, people want to believe their head coaches, and look, maybe he has practicing, maybe he's cleared protocol now, maybe he's better, but what do you expect a head coach to say the week of their biggest game of the year with college football playoff implications and the rankings come out? Of course he's going to be hopeful that his starting quarterback is going to play. So yeah, but I was thinking that too. Like afterwards, I'm like, this is why I don't go public with stuff that I hear. Usually, like in the past, I would pass it on to Pete Thamel, or now I do the same thing with Bruce Feldman if I'm hearing something, and I'll let them do the dick and let them get the credit for it. But yeah, I partially blame myself a little bit for it because like I'm so comfortable and I'm friends with Coach Don and going back years from his time at ESPN. And he asked me to hop on. We're talking about the game, and then sure enough, I start talking about potential concussions and quarterbacks not playing. But yeah, no, I hope he plays because it's obviously a much better game with him in there. Without him in the game, I don't know how many points Tennessee is really going to be able to score. And on the flip side, I don't know right now the way the Georgia offense is constructed with Carson Beck struggling, how many points that Georgia offense is going to be able to put on the board against a really good Tennessee defense.
I was going to ask you that too, because I saw that opening line and thought, that's a little bit high. It's a little bit high for how much Georgia just got walloped by Ole Miss. And the things that Tennessee does well, at least with that defensive front, are really similar to what Ole Miss does well. And we saw how that played out with Georgia in an offensive line that just didn't have a chance. And I saw that opening line and I went, dang. I realized the recent history of this rivalry, but that's significant. Do you think it's a 4-point swing if we know for certain at the start of this game that Gaston Moore is the starter instead of Nico?
I think if Gaston Moore is the starter, I think we might have already hit 11 at some point earlier in the day. I know we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. I think I did see an 11 earlier today. I think it could hit 12 or 13. I think if Gaston Moore is indeed the starter, and probably it goes back down to about 8.5 if Nico was able to play. But I just wonder, do you think Tennessee, I know defensively, they certainly can give Georgia similar problems in terms of running the ball and the athletes they have on that front seven. But on the flip, do you think Tennessee can do the same things offensively that Ole Miss did that could give Georgia problems? Because I don't.
That's the issue. That's definitely the issue. And, healthy Nico or not, it's still been a work in progress with the downfield passing attack. Ole Miss took advantage of some of those spots. They were able to hit on the downfield passing attack. And it's not like Georgia's run defense has been a doormat. It's actually been a lot better in the last month. What does Tennessee do best? They run the football with Dylan Sampson. They run the football with him. And if he can't get going, well, obviously then Tennessee's going to be susceptible. But it feels like a game in which you wonder which offense is going to make the less catastrophic mistake and who can benefit the most, similar to Georgia and Texas, where obviously Georgia was able to benefit from the mistakes that Texas made.
And that's like one of the old coaching adages and cliches 101 is like bad loses more than good wins. And I think that's probably the way that I would expect Kirby Smart and Josh Heupel probably to go about this game, because especially in the instance of Georgia, like their bad offensive performances have cost them games. With turnovers. So I think you'll probably see a very safe game plan from Georgia, at least early on. And maybe if they get up, they'll open things up a little bit. But yeah, look, I think part of the angst from the Tennessee fans is maybe there's a little bit of writing on the wall. And I am friends with a couple of very big, diehard Tennessee fans who went to school there, and I think they see the 10-2 win over Alabama potentially being left out of the playoff. That's where we're going. And look, I get it. Like I thought the rankings on Tuesday night were comical. Again, I didn't get too worked up over it because obviously the two highest leverage games of the year are the next couple of weeks, with the game in Athens on Saturday and then Indiana, Ohio State next week. But like I think people see the writing on the wall where you're going to have potentially a 10-2 SEC team that might be, just because of numbers on the outside looking in. Like if you're in the SEC right now, you are rooting for USC to beat Notre Dame in a couple of weeks to give the Irish a second look, because I don't know if they necessarily would be. And even though it would be hard not to take Notre Dame over Texas A&M if it came down to that, should the Aggies be in that conversation as well. But like it's all playoff based and driven. Look, I get it, but yeah, the way the rankings came out on Tuesday and essentially appeared to be just ordering teams in number of losses was kind of laughable. Like, how the hell do you have Miami at 9? Like, look, I'm a Miami alum. There's no way you can have them ahead of some of the teams that they are ahead of right now. How do you move BYU up 3 spots off of a win over a 4-5 Utah team, penalty aided against a Utah team that clearly is not the team that we thought they were? And then you've got Indiana off of probably their worst performance of the year over a win over the biggest name they have of the year. But this is a very bad Michigan team. And I think that win probably drew more questions into how good Indiana is, and basically solidifying thinking that they are certainly a top 4, top 5 type team right now. So it's amazing between Indiana and Texas getting the boost, the apparent boost that they are for a win against a bad Michigan team is pretty amazing, because you got number 3, number 4, and number 5 right now, Indiana, Texas, and Penn State. 0 wins over teams currently ranked, and you got Alabama down there right now with 4 all by themselves. So Alabama's got more wins over current ranked teams than the entire top 5 does right now combined. Now, granted, that'll change because someone's going to lose in South Carolina, Missouri. LSU may not be done losing, so we'll see. But the way the rankings went out last night kind of were a little head scratching. But like I said, I am not going to get too worked up for it until we see what happens in a couple of weeks.
It was kind of righting the wrong of last week with BYU and with Indiana too. I mean, look, and I'm going to come off bias probably by saying this is an Indiana grad, but we're looking at a situation in which the selection committee clearly had a lot of pushback to BYU and Indiana. They move ahead of Tennessee. You obviously knew they were going to move past Miami. They were going to move past Georgia because of those teams losing, but to move them past Tennessee, it was almost like a quiet little, we hope somebody doesn't notice this and doesn't realize that the wins itself were not really separators. It was just, we messed up last week and we needed to do this week.
And it's hard because I think Indiana is pretty good, but you're not going to win a resume battle with any of these teams.
Agreed.
You haven't had the opportunity to win. Like Rourke has been, saying he's going to win Coach of the Year. Rourke has been a great story. They've been the poster child for what you can do with a great coaching hire and proper use of the portal and NIL and getting people in there. It's just unfortunately a fact that their schedule's 100th in the country. Now, look, I know you can only play and you can only beat the teams on your schedule, but I just hope as a college football fan that they don't go to Columbus next week and lose by 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
You saw Nebraska go to Columbus, fight and nearly win, had a couple of possessions inside the 5-yard line where they couldn't score touchdowns, and that ultimately cost them the game. You go to Columbus, you play well. I don't think you're going to be out of the playoff at 11-1, but just don't give the committee an opportunity to really hold that schedule against you and the fact you haven't beaten anybody good, because we saw that usually we'll see the committee kind of use their guidelines, and last year for the first time they had a very controversial call in leaving Florida State out because they had the stipulation in their guidelines for ranking teams as they're currently constructed, and clearly Florida State was not the same team as without Jordan Travis as they were with him, and if you were going to take Alabama as an SEC champ in the playoff, you had to take Texas. They were connected at the hip, and now this year as well, quality wins, head-to-head comparison, all that stuff is going to come into play. And if Indiana they're not going to win a resume battle with anyone. So you're just going to have to come down and say, we think Indiana is better than whomever else. And if that's the case, fine. They are. But it's so funny because in the beginning of the year, I was completely, I don't want to say nonplussed or against, but 12 teams. I was always a 4 guy. I always said you're not really expanding the number of teams that has a chance to win the college football championship. You're really just expanding the number of teams that are going to talk about it and get in the playoff and keep an interest longer. I kind of disagree with my pre-season thought now. If you look, I thought it was Ohio State and Georgia and everybody else prior to the year, but you can throw Oregon in there now. You can throw Texas in there. I think you can throw Ole Miss. I think any one of those 5 certainly could wind up winning the national title, and that's good for the sport.
It is. It definitely is. And I think, I heard Big Cat talk about this with Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman talking about how, if we had that take 5-6 years ago, it's totally plausible and it makes sense. But now with the way that talent it's seemingly spread out more with NIL and the portal and the way that teams can address roster needs. There's more teams that can win a national championship. So that's definitely part of it. I want to talk about your school because I need everybody to know that I didn't just hit you up after Miami lost or something like that.
Sure you did.
We set this up a week ago. Miami was still undefeated at the time. But you seem to have a pretty measured take on what this team is because, on one hand, as a Miami fan, like Cam Ward has an obvious path to get to New York, of course, and very well could be the first Miami quarterback since Vinny Testaverde to be drafted in the first 3 rounds, which is just insane. Yeah. And on the other hand, Miami has this obvious weakness. Every single time they step on the field that they can't tackle, and they probably don't have a loss to give at this point. Where are you at with this team? And are you trying to soak this in while not being too critical of the potential hurdles that could await?
As I've said, I'm in a very large Miami group chat with a lot of people in the industry and people close to the program and former players and such. And I basically said every single one of us prior to that Florida game would have signed up for 9-1 right now and 3 wins away from the college football playoff. It's a fact. I said we because we're all mostly alums in there. I said we very easily could be 7-3. Some might say probably should be 7-3, but we're not. We're 9-1. You beat Wake Forest. You beat Syracuse. You go to the ACC championship game. You're playing for the college football playoff. Every single one of us would have taken that before the year started. Now it's because of you were undefeated. Cam is probably going to New York. The excitement of the offense, like people are a little bit disappointed now because you had that little bit of glimmer, like maybe we could win the national championship, maybe we could go undefeated. But the way that you hit on it, defensively, they've got some issues. Barron and Bain have not been finishing plays in terms of getting sack numbers that I think a lot of people thought they would get. The secondary has been giving up big plays. You mentioned the tackling problems. Like that was the biggest alarm to me on Saturday was you knew Haynes King couldn't throw. And they're essentially running what felt like 3 or 4 plays, the same one the entire game, and Miami just couldn't get them off the field. So that's the problem. But again, I did not view this team as a national championship team coming into the year. It was always get to the playoff. Maybe you get a home game or maybe whatever else. Maybe you win a game and you're in the semifinal. That would have been a great year. And those goals are still there. I think the game at Syracuse in a couple of weeks could be tricky because they can obviously move the ball and they can score. And I'm sure the fans at the I don't know, are they calling it the Carrier Dome? It's something else. It's not even the Carrier Dome anymore, right? Yeah. It's something else. Yeah, they'll be worked up to try and beat Miami. But yeah, I'm hopeful that they can win out and get to the but you're right. If they were to lose either to Syracuse and not make the ACC title game, or if they were to lose in the ACC title game, the league just does not have a non-conference win to hang a hat on. And Florida certainly is not the team that I shouldn't say people thought they were going to be, because I don't think people thought Florida was in for a great year. But you look at Miami and the escapes that they've had and some of the game control metrics and the strength of record and such. They are. I think the ACC is a one big lead, and I think the Big 12 ultimately is a one big lead, big league as well.
I think Mario deserves a lot of credit for putting this team in this position, having the ability to recognize those roster needs, being able to fundraise to get the NIL money when it was clearly a bidding war to be able to get Cam Ward. And, at the same time, though, how big of a window missed would this be for him? Because you look at the ACC right now, you look at the favorable schedule, you look at the spending on this roster, and you have the quarterback, like you have the guy finally. And I'm not saying it's similar to the 2017 Mark Richt thing where you saw that window come and go in a span of about 3 weeks.
That was a complete smoke and mirrors league team. That was for sure.
But how devastating would it be if this Miami team didn't find its way into the college football playoff? Because I agree with you. I think if you make the playoff, successful season, keep it rolling, no matter what next year looks like, you could be like, as a sports fan, you can have your appetite satisfied from that. But anything short of that feels like it would just be a brutal development.
It would be a massive failure and massive disappointment based on the schedule that they had in the league and how down Florida State is, how down per se Clemson is. You'd have SMU coming in from the Group of Five potentially to wind up winning this league. Like you maybe. It would certainly mean, I would think, a change of defensive coordinator with Lance Guidry. Who knows if Shannon Dawson is going to be back next year as coordinator. His name has kind of been floated out there for some head coaching jobs. You're one and done with Cam, and you probably don't have your quarterback for 2025 on the roster. So you're kind of back to portaling in a quarterback again. So yeah, it's a rough cycle, and who knows what the schedule is going to hold for next year. It would be a huge disappointment for not just the Miami fans, but for the coaches and the players and everybody associated with the program if for some reason they don't find their way. You go to the SEC championship game and you lose to your former offensive coordinator and a bunch of former Canes who are at SMU right now in that ACC title game. That would be a very, very, very hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
God, I didn't even consider the Rhett Lashley element to this. That's a good point. It's a really good point. Who are your Heisman bets on? And when did you get them in? Like, what do they look like right now?
Well, I will start from the bad to the good. The bad was Julian Sayin, Ohio State. I thought there was a really good chance he could have won the job. And I'm like, Ohio State's going to be top 3 team in the country. And Ohio State quarterback probably would be in the Heisman, but obviously Sayin did not win the job. It's been
was that like March that you had that in?
Was that
like March that you put
that
in? Like
was
a
in June.
Okay, yeah, it's still early.
Yeah, it's still early. So I got that in. I played Carson Beck to win the Heisman again. Same thing, quarterback on a top team. And then I bought some Quinn Ewers to win the Heisman when he missed a game. And I'm like, he's only going to miss a game or two. They beat Georgia. They're going to be number 1 in the country. Maybe a time to buy at a bad price. So those are the misses. However, there's this little ticket I have in my account right now that says Travis Hunter plus 6,000, aka 60-1, to win the Heisman Trophy, and that was also made in June.
Would that be your best win ever with a Heisman future?
For a Heisman future, and last year I wound up getting Jaden Daniels at like 30-1 at some point in October, but to take a chance on a flyer, and it was basically me going down the list of contenders before the year and just kind of saying, okay, well, what if Georgia does lose 3 games, or what if Arch does wind up beating out Ewers or playing a considerable amount of time, and Texas has a bit of a drop off. Will Howard, they probably wouldn't give it to him. I don't think he's going to be a high. Like I think it just kind of went down. Like Drew Aller's not going to win the Heisman. I'm like, maybe this is a year where you've got an opportunity for a guy who I think a lot of people feel is going to be the best player, and what. If he could stay healthy and do what he does on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, I think he's got a real chance. And now to be holding that ticket with a couple of weeks left to go, I feel pretty good. And it's funny because I looked earlier today. One of my buddies sent me a text that at Circa, which I believe is in Colorado, and I'm gonna have to do some thinking over the next couple of days to figure out if I want to do this or not. He is you can get a yes/no price on Hunter to win the Heisman at plus 115. So do I want to hedge a little bit at plus 115 against the 60-1? I don't know. My hunch is that this ultimately comes down to Dylan Gabriel and Travis Hunter. I think if Oregon were to win out and win the Big Ten, and Colorado does not reach the Big 12 championship game, I think there's a chance Gabriel can win. I think some other people are kind of split on that. And I know I have not mentioned Ashton Jeanty. I just have a hard time thinking we're going to get to a point here where you've got either a Power 5 quarterback on the number 1 ranked team in the country, or a clear two-way star who has an impact on both sides of the ball, that one of those two would not be awarded the trophy over a Group of 5 running back. Is it harsh sounding? Is it maybe unfair? Yeah, but there have been people who haven't voted for a lot of worthy candidates for whatever reason. But I will say, I was kicking this around too on the Bear Bets pod before. Could you imagine a year where now Jeanty's going to win the Doak Walker? I mean, that's obvious. I mean, he is the best running back in the country. Could you imagine where you've got Jeanty winning the Doak Walker and potentially Nick Nash at San Jose State, winning the Biletnikoff, like 2 group of 5 players from the Mountain West, being like the best positional player in their respective positions over the course of that would be amazing. So we'll see if Nash can win over Jeremiah Smith and Travis Hunter at receiver. But goes to show that these awards certainly can be wide open. You can find some real ridiculous long shots.
Those 2 guys face each other this weekend as
They
well.
They do, and that is not a gimme game at all for Boise. Be very careful. You look at Boise's road games this year; they hung on UNLV in a game they very easily could have lost. Obviously, they played great at Oregon, but the game also on the road at Hawaii was a 6-point game, I think, in the fourth quarter before they ultimately pulled away. They did not look great last week against Nevada. Like, San Jose State can score, and they're pretty good against the run. Don't be surprised if you look up on Saturday and see that a very close game between Boise and San Jose State. And I wonder how ultimately that will affect Boise. Like, I think everybody feels like if they win out, they're going to be the group of 5 rep. But I think a lot of people also were just assuming that they were going to play UNLV again. And Colorado State, oh, by the way, is still undefeated in the Mountain West as well. Like, if you get a Boise, Colorado State Mountain West title game, like, what's the perception of that? Being you've got a Colorado State team that lost, 52-0 or whatever it was to Texas, and has some other, like, brutal non-conference losses in there as well. Like, does that ultimately affect them and maybe give a team like Tulane some hope, even though they have the 2 losses potentially?
If you can believe it or not, that is not the first mention on this show of San Jose State's run defense. Already brought it up. We 1 fourth quarter rushing touchdown allowed by San Jose State this year, 0 runs of 20 yards. That's the key stat for Genty going into that matchup. Interesting thing that I don't want to wish into existence for the sake of your 60-1 ticket. Okay, I'm not doing this just to troll. I promise you I'm not. But if there is another hedge for you, or for anybody listening to this that is maybe out there with a Travis Hunter ticket and doesn't want to endure the stress of a guy that plays 140 snaps that can go down at any given moment, an interesting hedge, Shedeur at 40-1. All right, because baked into those odds already are the fact that he's on the same team as Travis Hunter, and we agree he's not the best player on his own team. But if he gets hurt and they play 2 or 3 games without him, and it's a 9-win Colorado team, or a Colorado team that goes on to win the Big 12 championship and wins it maybe without Travis Hunter on the field, Shedeur ends up with 40 touchdowns or something like that, and you're looking up going, man, this guy has turned himself into an unreal player. I'm not saying that that's a likely scenario. I'm saying that is a Travis Hunter hedge if you are searching for one outside of just, holding on to that ticket until the bitter end.
No, that's not a bad way to go about it either at all. What I do find interesting is how Deion Sanders has gotten fully behind and all in on Hunter being their Heisman candidate. Even Shedeur has as well. Like, we asked him last week on Big Noon Kickoff, like if you had one vote for the Heisman Trophy, who are you giving? And like, before we could even finish the sentence, I think it was Mark Ingram who asked it. It was like Travis. Travis is the best player, and so it's amazing. But the thing that I guess the one thing that I'm worried about with Colorado is, like, if he has a great game and they lose to Kansas, or they don't make the Big 12 championship game, like, what happens? Like that's I think that probably would be kind of the same situation with Shedeur as well. Even though the other bet that I did make when I was in Indiana a few weeks back, I did play Shedeur at plus 650 to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft next year. And there were a couple of nice boosts that I was able to use on that as well, that got that up to like a 9-1 as well, like a little 50% boost. So I think it's funny. You talk to the guys on our set, and Mark Ingram even said, like, you put him at Ohio State, you put him at USC, you put him at Georgia, you put him at one of these blue blood name programs, and Shedeur is the runaway Heisman Trophy winner right now. He's just right now, unfortunately, on the team with a unicorn right now and doing things that the sport has never even seen, because people want to say, oh, well, Charles Woodson did not have the impact on the offensive side of the ball that Travis Hunter did, not even close. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens the rest of the way. But hopefully we can get that Hunter ticket home, and hopefully he can stay healthy, and hopefully Colorado will be in the Big 12 title game. Looking forward to getting out there this week, because I'm really curious to see if Utah has any fight left in that game on Saturday morning, because I was talking to some people who, not the same people that were telling me about Nico, different people. I got a lot of people, just different people, but they had never seen the Utah football building and the facility there the way they were Monday morning. Just so much just sadness and just dejection in the way that game went on Saturday night. And now you got Rose out for the year. Offensively, how are they going to score? Like, if Colorado is able to get up early on Utah in that game, it could be another Heisman type profile game for Travis Hunter and that Colorado offense, because it's been a tough year for Colorado. Only so many injuries you can take before you finally say ultimately I give.
And for what it's worth, he's playing like 2 games every time he plays one. So even if he does get hurt, it's like, well, look at the snap count. That's probably something that should be working in his favor. Been a wild year. I want to get you out of here on a couple national championship futures.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we were talking about earlier, 7 to 8 teams maybe that can win a title, and it might just come down to who can stay healthy, who can get a favorable draw, who can play their best football down the stretch, obviously. But Georgia being at 8-1. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've never seen it at that. If you have any sort of faith in Georgia, yeah, but that would be a stay away for you.
No. Here's the funny thing about that. After they lost to the first game of the year against Alabama, I went out and got plus 650 on them.
Yeah,
you're never going to see this price again. They're going to be in the playoff, and picking up that second loss, and now you got it 8-8, whatever it is, 758, 850. Like, it's still a play. They're a double-digit favorite at home this week against a team that might have their backup quarterback on the they're probably going to win this week, and then they're not going to lose with UMass, I think, after that, and then they got Georgia Tech. Like, if they win this week, they're in the playoff, and maybe they have to play a first-round game somewhere. Maybe they host, maybe they don't. Maybe somehow they whatever. Who knows how the top 4 seeds are ultimately going to work out? But you're telling me in a 1-game repeat situation over the course of 3 games, like Georgia, you're going to want to play them? Hell no. Not at all. So, yeah, Georgia is still a play. Ole Miss would be a play, and we were talking about this last week prior to the Georgia game. They were like 28-1, I think, last week to win the title. And we're like, probably if you think they're going to beat Georgia, like, you can't get to the playoff if you don't beat Georgia. If you beat Georgia, you're in the playoff more than likely, and then your price is slashed. And now you're looking at Ole Miss potentially 950, 10-1 to win the title. Like, based on based on the bracket now, like a first round game would be Ole Miss at Penn State. Like, you wouldn't like that Ole Miss front going against the Penn State offense. So if you're looking to play a team right now, Georgia and Ole Miss were the 2 that I would play. Even Ole Miss at the number that they are. If you didn't get on it last week, that's fine. But I think then obviously Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State, who I think are the three short shots right now. I wouldn't play any of those, particularly at these prices right now. But I do have an Ohio State or Georgia versus the field from before the year. Let me throw this out to you as well. I know we were talking about SEC teams and maybe someone being left out. Like, if you're Texas, and I know we all think Texas is on paper one of the best 3-4 teams in the country, talent-wise and efficiency-wise. Like, if you lose by 2 touchdowns on your home field to Georgia and you go to College Station and lose, like, you don't have a whole lot to hang your hat on. Again, like in the case of Indiana, like, okay, we think Indiana is one of the best at-large teams in the country. It's basically going to have to be the committee saying, hey, we think Texas is just better than Team B. Like, but if I'm Texas, I sure as hell don't want to mess around with fate if you happen to lose at Kyle Field.
It feels like they're already saying they think they're better, though. That's the thing, man. To have them at 3, when you look at the resume, and yeah, Penn State and Texas are both sitting in a really similar spot with the selection committee saying, yeah, we know the loss is really good. We know the wins aren't particularly great at this point. And whatever. We don't care. And they still just put them at those spots. And I think that's kind of the intrigue. And that's maybe the saving grace for Texas, is if they do lose that game to A&M, and who knows? I mean, we could have just a slew of 10-2 SEC teams. It feels like it's setting up for that. But you got to feel pretty good with what the selection committee has said these first 2 polls to be at that spot, knowing what the resume is right now and knowing that, yeah, I mean, you'd ideally like to beat A&M, of course, and rack up that win. But yeah, it'll be fascinating to see the way that this plays out for the SEC and other teams that are sitting there at 10-2. One last thing for you, knowing Kirk as well as you do, you've known him for decades.
Yep.
I was wondering if you had a Ben story.
The funny thing is, Ben never really came out on the road regularly. I mean, he came out every now and then, and it was awesome just to have a dog sitting on the bus and just kind of be, I don't want to say be like the icebreaker or the tension breaker, but I mean, I'm to a point these days in a lot of cases we're all like animals more than I do people. But no, it's been awesome to see Kirk bring him on the road the last couple of years on a regular basis. And he even said it in in his little piece. I went back and watched it after the show about how, look, being on the road, you miss family. You're on the road. You're in hotel rooms. It's different. And he gave him that little bit of peace in solace. And obviously it was terrible what happened. And you kind of, when Kirk first tweeted about it, you're like, oh no, this, unfortunately, I don't think this is going to end well, because I think a lot of people have been in the shoe with the pet and cancer and knowing the battle and the odds probably that they're facing and how much they tend to hide pain. And a lot of times you don't realize it until it's too late. And even if you would have realized it earlier, you're probably were too late to begin with. But no, I hope he's doing okay. I've reached out to him, and I'm sure he's still kind of trying to deal with things, and he's a busy man with the season. So I'm gonna just been trading text and so. But yeah, it was great to see him bring the youngin on the road too. Kind of like an Uga situation where we just passed the torch on to the youngin down the road, and hopefully he can continue with Pete and bringing him on the road. But it is amazing that Ben became the cult hero that he did. I wish you would have brought him on the road more when I was there.
Right? It was almost like he, in a way, I mean, Ben kind of replaced you. I'm just.
You said that, not me.
I'm just saying.
I think Ben was in his life a hell of a lot more than I was. But no, it's like I say. Look, he said it, and I can totally get there with him. Like we're on the road for 4 months straight, and spending, and now that he's doing the Amazon game, he's in a hotel room. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he's in a hotel bedroom more often during football season than he is in his own home. And you don't see your family, you don't see your wife, you don't see your pets, you don't really deal with your kids as much anymore. And you're kind of looking for a little normalcy, a little something to give you a taste of home and comfort level, and that's what Ben did for him, and that's awesome. I'm the same way. I'm maybe you're in, okay, it's a time of the year now where it's like, okay, I can literally carry the hotel key swatch with me, like saying what room am I in, because it's like you forget, like, okay, where I am, what time zone is it, what city am I in, what time do I need to meet the crew for dinner, where am I going? Okay, I'm in 309 this week. Okay, and it's you after being on the road for so many months, it does kind of look. Are some of these deals first world problems, and the fact that we get to cover a college football game for a living every week? Yeah, they are. But still, it's time away from home. It's all that stuff. And once the year's over, I'm sure there'll be an instance where you're back home in January, and then come like the end of February, you're like, God, I can't wait for the season to get here. I got to get out of the house again.
Amen. Oh, one last one.
Oh, you lied to me. You said
I did.
Okay.
Have you watched The Office all the way through yet?
No, I haven't.
Come on. You had surgery too, and that was
I know I did. You did. The surgery last year was unbelievable. Like that was when that nerve block wore off a couple of days after the operation. That was bad. But yeah, the surgery came, and then we had then it came into Christmas and then New Year's, and and then I was still doing like the pods. I never did. Like I know I'll have to. It's still like on the DVR where we left off, and it's funny because I have listened and I probably shouldn't have listening to the Office Ladies pod.
Good pod, yeah,
with Angela and
Jenna Fisher, yeah.
And it's like, I surely shouldn't have done this until I listened to I watched the whole damn thing through.
Hey, you got plenty of time.
I
Plenty of
do.
time. It's sitting there at the DVR. You're
It
good.
is.
You're good, man. Safe travels on the way to Boulder. You're the best. We'll do this again, man.
Thanks, bud. I appreciate you.
All right, well, let's close with some lad of the week. You want to start or you want me to start?
You can go ahead.
All right, let's start with Pete Golding. I teased this the other day. The arc that he's had in his career, very atypical. The guy who was kind of the punching bag at Bama, a decade of nothing but top 8 scoring defenses. He gets there, spends 5 years there. They never have a top 8 scoring defense. What he's done at Ole Miss, at a place that, look, wanted him. And I think it felt good for him to be wanted. Football Scoop reported that he did have an offer for a raise to stay at Alabama. You could infer what you will with that. Would Alabama have matched Ole Miss if they wanted to? Perhaps they would, but ultimately Ole Miss made him a really nice offer. It was like $1.85 million. I think he got a raise to get into the $2 million club last year with the job that he did year one. And to see what this defense has become, you saw it play out against Georgia. It's just masterful. And he talked about it in the offseason. He tried to lower expectations of saying, look, it's great that we got all these guys. And he played a part in recruiting those guys. Let's not dismiss that and the job that he's done getting those guys to come on board, saying, buy into my scheme. It's one thing to get guys that buy in because they're desperate and they want to get that NFL contract and they couldn't get playing time here or there. But to have guys that are established players come in and say, yes, we will make this work. And they have just feasted. 5 of their players on defense are among the top 9 in the SEC and TFLs. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy what they have been able to generate with the pressure up front. I just love the Pete Golding arc. I think he's absolutely, I made the case for him on SDS this week that I think he needs to be one of the front runners for the Broyles Award. A lot of other great candidates. I think Tim Banks is one that comes to mind. Mike Shanahan, the OC at Indiana, obviously is going to get consideration. There are a bunch of other coaches. Shannon Dawson, even at Miami, the offensive coordinator there, he's going to be part of that. But I just think the job that Pete Golding has done with total autonomy on that side of the ball on defense after, look, he was the butt of the joke and he had the DUI thing. And this is a guy that has probably had to deal with a whole lot of crap, being always the reason that Alabama's defense was bad, but never necessarily the reason that Alabama's defense was good. That's kind of what you sign up for when you're a defensive-minded coach with Nick Saban. But I love what he's done, and he is somebody that's become incredibly valuable to what they're doing. If they make the college football playoff and go 10-2, a lot of credit will certainly be worthy to go Pete Golding's way.
Love that, my boy Pete. Yeah, he's a guy. I don't know if he's Cajun necessarily, but he's from.
I think so.
He's from the kind of that region of the country as Louisiana roots. So I always love to see that. Ton of stuff this week. There's a big week for lads and lasses. We talked a little bit about the Kirk thing with Ben, so I want to get into that. Obviously, Milroe, Kane Womack, Lane Kiffin, all those folks on the personal side. I already talked about Krista and her husband John, but they're always super nice to us. We go to the tailgate. It's becoming a tradition that I love. This one for me is a personal one. Comes with a kind of a fun story real quick. So my last of the week is my mom. Because I don't even think I told you about this. Again, the vibes were not great in Baton Rouge. One of the reasons why was because I forgot my suitcase. And so I pack in a really specific way. I put all my necessities on my back in my backpack, and I never forget that. I had a suitcase full of clothes that I just left inside the door when I walked out. Just nobody caught it. I didn't catch it, whatever. So I'm at the airport, but it's supposed to board my flight at like 7:30 or whatever. I call my mom. I'm like, hey, here's the deal. I don't have my suitcase. I think I got to change my flight. And she's like, what was in your suitcase? And I was like, clothes. And she's like, get on the plane, Will. I was Seriously? Like, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm getting on the plane. So I pull up. My mom has 2 pairs of pant options for me to go to this nice dinner with her. One of them are like Steve Irwin safari pants that are like 2 sizes too big. The largest pockets I've ever seen in my life. The second pair of pants was as if like a pop punk bassist was wearing them. So tight, made my thighs look tiny. Oh, I, of course, went with the tiny thighs because I'm like, I can't be wearing my Steve Irwin 5000s. So I go to dinner. It's great. I wake up the next day. We go to brunch. My mom's like, you're just here with your mom and your girlfriend. Who cares what you look like? So I'm parading around New Orleans in my safari pants. Got a little LSU slogan that kind of goes with the song Neck. I'll let you figure it out. Walking around. My mom's happy as a clam, taking selfies with me. I'm like, Mom, please don't post that. I have professional friends. I don't want to be seen in this shirt with these pants on. But we had a great time. We went on a little history tour, like horse-drawn carriage. And it just kind of like goes to show that, like, this stuff is like the stuff we stress about about really doesn't matter that much. So the whole point of the trip was hanging out with my mom, hanging out with my friends. Doesn't matter that Jeff Landry is an animal abuser or that LSU got abused as well. It's all about your friends. Trust them more than Brian Kelly.
That's awesome. Yeah, if there was ever a time to forget your suitcase, it's when you're going home and you know you're going to be with your mom. I mean, come on, like the amount of times that I have forgotten something, and it's one thing to forget an entire suitcase, but you forget one thing here or there. There are times when my mom's like, just you don't worry about like bringing clothes home or anything like that. You leave all the winter clothes at home. I don't have any winter clothes here in Florida or anything like that, and they just spring to action. They'll just cover for you. It's the absolute best. Nice to see that you were still able to enjoy that quality time and not have the result impact the entire weekend as a whole.
And guys, this is a definitely at your own risk experience, but if you ever have the opportunity to go pick out clothes with your mom and your significant other at the same time, go for it. It's a comedy episode, no matter if it's poorly or well. Because I'm walking out. This is actually a new shirt I got. It's got a little crawfish on it. I'm walking out, getting the thumbs up and the thumb down for my mom and my girl. I felt like I was on like American Idol or something. It was a great time. So it all worked out.
Goodness. Absolutely love it. All right. Week 12 should be a fun week in the SEC. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SES Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.